Art This Week. I am Osinachi Okafor, and today we are at Museum of Fine Art Houston speaking with Elizabeth Essner about the exhibition Toshiko Takaezu, Worlds Within. Hi Elizabeth, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to have you here in this exhibition.
I really loved this exhibition. It was one of a kind for me, and I'd like to know what inspired the title Worlds Within.
That's a great question, and I'm really glad to hear how inspiring it was for you. It's been really exciting for us here at the museum to see how audiences have responded to her work, both those that kind of knew her work and often those who did not. The title Worlds Within is a really important part of our practice. It refers to these things that we cannot see. So Toshiko Takaezu, and we're sitting here in the exhibition, so you can see some of her closed forms. These are really important, really signature forms for her work. And she's interested in the form. She's interested in these incredible surfaces, which you can really think about as landscapes. But she's equally interested in the interior of these works. She's interested in what she thinks of as this, what she says is really this dark space that you cannot see. Thinking about the idea of the interior in a very poetic and a very metaphorical way. And you'll see this idea throughout the exhibition. I can talk a little bit about one of the ways that she really sought to illuminate this idea. Right around 1960, she was throwing one of her closed forms, and you can see them here. So they are vessels. They do have a top, but it is this tiny, almost vestigial top. These are really kind of 360-degree canvases. She thinks of them as sort of a combination of painting and sculpture. But right around 1960, she's making one of her works, and it just so happens that this little bit of clay falls out into the interior and is separate. Now, this is kind of miraculous. It should have stuck to the wet clay on the interior before she fired it, but it didn't. And when she took it out, of course, she's taking it out and all of a sudden it starts to ring, right? This little bit of clay has remained separate and therefore creates this kind of rattle, right? And this is a complete mistake. But often in her career, she really embraced these mistakes and brought them into part of her work. And she realized that this sound was this way for her to really illuminate that interior space, a way to communicate to others what this interior space might be. And over time, she would wrap bits of paper, sometimes with messages on them, and then put the clay inside. Now, of course, the paper burns off in the kiln. She would call it sending messages. These messages sort of are carried with this paper. She would also sometimes write on the inside of the pod, and we just had Leila Lanzalotti, who was a sound artist, who in this exhibition, one of the co-curators who really thought about sound and had a number of videos. She does demonstrations of these. She was suggesting that in these writings, these interior writings that we cannot see, they also offered these kind of interior landscapes for the rattle, so they would create actually kind of different tones, different kind of sonic environments inside, as well as the messages that they conveyed. She's also really interested in creating in ideas of universes, and if you look at some of her moonscapes, if you look at Gaia, one of the sort of key works, you will see how she's kind of building these worlds. And so both of those ideas, worlds and within, are very central to understanding her practice.
Could you tell us more about her early works?
Absolutely. I think this exhibition does an incredible job of talking about the development of her work. I think it's important throughout her career, and a thread that you can see from the early works to the latest, is this dialogue between objects, often between materials. And so we have her earliest works both responding to the land and landscape of Hawaii and some of the earliest work that she made, including this little gold flower. It's a press molded piece. She did not keep a lot of work from this early period of the 1940s, and so we're really pleased to be able to have it. In that same grouping of material, you'll see weavings that include plant fibers from Hawaii. You'll see a pot that includes sand from Hawaii. When she had come to Cranbrook, this was something that she was interested in exploring and had brought sand with her. That said, this is something that is very much frowned upon today. Obviously, times were different then. And you can see how she moves from there to Cranbrook, really looking at these very domestic, functional works. But even within them, you can see the seeds of what is going to happen. You can see this relationship between fiber and clay. You can see this dialogue that she is having between objects. There's a teapot that's in that early Cranbrook installation that you can follow along to see how she's building this form, which is essentially sort of a spout and a handle. You can see how all of a sudden that spout and that handle start to rise up to the top of the pot. All of a sudden they move from function to this really exploratory, experimental forms. We have a grouping of them that we sort of call the flock of pots. She once displayed all of these kind of multi-spouted forms on the ground. We have a picture of them in this sort of green grass, and it's almost as if these spouts, they're sort of lifting their heads up like little birds. You can see this kind of really interesting, just every experiment. She is taking two forms, bringing them together and pulling them apart. She is gathering these kind of families of forms together, building them into one. She is building one single form that has these three openings at the top. She called these mask pots because if you look down on them, it's almost as if there is a mask. She sometimes had these incredible multi-spouted forms, and she's doing these all throughout the 1950s until she gets to right around 1958 and starts to make this closed form that defines really her career. Now, it was not the only form she made. She continued to make plates and bowls, moons, all sorts of other things, but this was really this primary vocabulary for her to explore surface, to explore color, to explore landscape in this way that I think only ceramics can offer, this absolute 360-degree way. And of course, these can rise up huge as they do in the Star series. Her latest works, it can be these tiny little palm-sized wonders that you see in the exhibition as well. So these early works, I think, present this amazing kind of trajectory that we hope really leads you to where she will go.
But I see something else very dominant in the work, the use of blues, or will I call it violet? Like, what do you think inspired these blues?
That's a great question, and very astute of you, because she was really known for her blues. And I think that you can really, as I said, you can really think about her works as landscapes. And not only can you think about them as landscapes, but you can think about them as the landscapes of Hawaii. So she was born in 1922 in Hawaii, really in a small village. Her parents were working on plantations. They were immigrants from Okinawa in the early 1900s. She grew up in this kind of rare environment of Hawaii. And much of her work is deeply inspired by the flora, by the fauna, by the land and the landscape that she saw there. And blue is a very important part of that. It was later sort of called Makaha blue, and this is named for a beach in Hawaii. And you can see it in these kind of vibrant objects. You can see it in some of her textiles. And it is this very intentional call, I think, to the sea.
I read in the catalog about how she always exhibited alongside Maya. That means friendship means a lot to her, and I really appreciated that. Like, I don't think a lot of people do that. Could you tell me more about that collaboration?
Yes, I can tell you about both her time at Cranbrook,
Yeah.
and I think seeing women who were artists, who were making their way at a time when women were not artists, and I think that is a credit to the fields of craft where women were really allowed to be artists. And I think that's a really important point. In Maya Grotell, who she was studying ceramics, she was also working in fiber and weaving with Marianne Strangell, another Finnish emigre and another kind of master of the 20th century. And within these women, right, she is able to have examples, to see what her life could look like with these women who are making their way as artists. And I think this is deeply influential for the life that she built. She becomes a teacher at Cleveland Institute of Art while creating her own work prior to this, right in between Cranbrook and Cleveland Institute of Art. She's encouraged by her mother and her sister to send this incredible 8-month trip to Japan. I think this is a real crux for her because I think that at this point she is deciding whether or not she can be this artist that she sees in Maya Grotell and in Marianne Strangell, or if she decides to be a wife and a mother. And I think there was a real binary. You had to choose, and or at least she felt she had to choose. Eventually, of course, she chooses being an artist. But from then on, being a teacher and an artist, she goes from Cleveland right around 1957 to 1965. She then comes to both Clinton, New Jersey, and then Quakertown, New Jersey, where she really makes her mature career teaching at Princeton University. As part of that, she embraces having apprentices, but she builds incredibly close friendships. And among them is an artist named Lenore Tawney. And if Takaezu is revolutionary in ceramics, you can think of Lenore Tawney as equally revolutionary, if not more, in the field of fiber art. And we have in the exhibition really this beautiful illustration of their really artistic friendship. They were the sort of peerless friends in terms of how they thought about creation. And so in the exhibition, you can see this 1979 kind of recreation almost of a 2-person exhibition that they had done together. So it is, we think of it as sort of a moonscape. You can see Tawney's incredible, almost lifting off the ground piece called Heart, and within it you see this circle with incredible apertures, this kind of ability to be both solid and transparent all at once. And then you see the landscape that Takaezu has created, really this universe that she has created of moons, which she often said she aimed for them to be rounder than round. Cool. And I'll let you think about what that means. But these just explosive 360-degree ways for her to create these masterful surfaces of color, of brush, drip, nearly exploded glazes that are just absolutely alive with color and with this sense of both gravity, clay, the earth, quite literally, but also this kind of orbiting universe.
That is all so good and interesting to hear. And I think that my favorite pieces here are like the Star series. Mm-hmm. Could you tell me more about it?
The Star series, so she began these right around 1994. She was in her 70s, so I think that's always a great lesson. She became more and more ambitious as she got older. It's a good lesson for us all. But she was able to do this because she started doing workshops and teaching at Skidmore College. And there they had kilns large enough to fire these huge ambitious works that she sort of said, I got to do it now. But they also had young students who were able to help her. So they would spin this wheel, the pottery wheel underneath her. Sometimes they would help her slowly throw these pieces. And so she really had the resources to realize this ambition that she had thought about for some time. She continued to make these works. The Star series, which is 14 pieces made between 1994 and about 2001. And they were sort of retroactively each named for a star. And she worked actually with an astrophysicist to name them. Yes, indeed. But as you can see, these ideas of sort of a cosmic universe are deeply influential to her and really carry through the sort of mature period of her career.
Pottery, tapestry were all gendered work, like pertaining to women, and they considered it craft, so they allowed the women to be and to do this. And now we're seeing that in the contemporary times, this is cutting into the general art scene and it's being practiced as a contemporary. How do you see this particular exhibition and what does this mean to you at this point in time?
That's a great question, and I think a perfect question to be asking, sort of a why now?
Yes.
I think that over the last decade, certainly, and probably more, we have been asking these questions about what does art of the 20th century look like? What does American art of the 20th century look like? And I think there has been a call for a great kind of canon expansion, sometimes revision, but really thinking through what art can look like and finding all of these people that were once considered in the margins and really realizing that they are hiding in plain sight. Now, Toshiko Takaezu was incredibly celebrated in her time in the field of craft. She was revered, exhibited, but outside of that field of craft, she was not as well known. I do think that as we're asking these questions, I think she has sort of been waiting for all of us to catch up. As we think about these questions, craft has often been the places where women, where non-dominant identities have been working and making, as you can see here, and I think Takaezu is a perfect example of just absolutely incredible work that as we rethink these margins, as I said, they've been hiding in plain sight. As you're really thinking about why now, I think this show has been really both incredibly gratifying for those that knew her and loved her, and it's amazing the dedication that the people who knew her still feel for her. I think it's equally gratifying to see all of these people that did not know her work come in with absolutely wide eyes and see the incredible complexity, the incredible depth of her practice, and discover her work.
Thank you for joining us.
It's absolutely my pleasure. It's such a pleasure to be able to share this incredible work with you and with audiences of Houston.
Find all of our videos and sign up for our newsletter at artthisweek.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter.